abandoned and starving. Little girl held a ragged toy and begged. What the biker did melted hearts. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The rain came down in slow, heavy sheets, soaking the empty road that cut through the edge of town like a forgotten scar. The streetlights flickered, casting weak yellow pools across cracked pavement and puddles that reflected nothing but darkness. A motorcycle rolled through the night, its engine low and steady, the sound echoing off closed storefronts and silent houses. The rider was a man most people would cross the street to avoid. Broad shoulders filled a worn leather jacket, his beard thick and untrimmed, his face marked by years of wind, sun, and roads that never asked permission. He rode without hurry, not running from anything and not chasing anything either. Then he saw her. She stood near a bus stop bench that had not been used in years, a small figure trembling under the dim light. She was too thin, her jacket hanging on her like it belonged to someone else. In her arms she clutched a toy, once colorful, now faded and torn, its stuffing pressing through the seams like it was trying to escape. When the motorcycle slowed, she took a step back, her eyes wide, her grip tightening around the ragged toy. She did not scream. She did not run. She just lifted her chin and spoke in a voice so quiet it barely rose above the rain. Please, sir. I am hungry. I will trade you this. The biker stopped. The engine idled, then went silent. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. Cars passed on a distant highway, but here there was only the rain and the sound of a little girl trying not to cry. He could see her ribs through the thin fabric of her shirt. He could see the way her hands shook, not from fear alone, but from hunger that had gone on too long. He could also see something else, something that hit harder than any punch he had ever taken. She was trying to be brave. She was standing there like this was just another door she had knocked on, another stranger she had asked, already prepared for the answer to be no. He swung his leg over the bike and stepped closer, careful not to rush, careful not to tower over her. The smell of wet asphalt and cold air filled his lungs. He remembered other nights, other roads, and a much smaller pair of hands reaching for help that never came. The girl held out the toy again, her fingers white with effort. It was all she had left, and she was ready to give it up for a chance to feel full, even for a moment. The biker looked at the toy, then at her face, and something inside him shifted, slow and heavy, like a door opening that had been sealed for years. He did not know her name. He did not know where she came from. But standing there in the rain, with a starving child offering her last comfort to a stranger, he knew one thing with painful clarity. Walking away was no longer an option. The biker stayed where he was, rain sliding down his jacket and pooling at his boots, while the little girl stood frozen with the toy pressed against her chest. Up close, the truth of her condition was impossible to ignore. Her cheeks were hollow, her lips pale, and her breath came in shallow bursts that fogged the air in front of her face. The jacket she wore was thin and too large, sleeves hanging past her wrists as if it once belonged to someone else who had vanished. Mud clung to the cuffs of her pants, dried and cracked in layers that told a story of days spent walking with nowhere to go. Her stomach growled loud enough to be heard over the rain, and when she realized the sound had escaped her, she looked down in embarrassment, as if hunger were something she needed to apologize for. The biker noticed everything. He noticed the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, because standing still took too much energy. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep could fix, because sleep does not come easily when food does not. He noticed the way she kept glancing at the street behind him, checking for other people, for danger, for the next reason to run. He did not step closer. Instead, he slowly reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded paper bag, soft from having been handled too many times. The girl stiffened, fear flashing across her face, but she did not move. He knelt down, careful and deliberate, lowering himself until he was closer to her height, then placed the bag on the wet ground between them and slid it forward with 2 fingers. The smell escaped first. Warm bread, meat, something fried. The girl inhaled sharply, her eyes widening before she could stop herself. She stared at the bag as if it might disappear, then looked back at him, searching his face for a catch that never came. He spoke for the first time, his voice rough but quiet, shaped by years of shouting over engines and wind. "You can eat. You do not have to give me anything." The words seemed to confuse her more than comfort her. She shook her head slowly, clutching the toy tighter. "People do not give things for nothing," she said, each word careful, practiced. "They always want something." The biker felt the weight of that sentence settle into his chest. He did not argue. He simply opened the bag and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in paper, then set it back down and leaned away, giving her space. She stared at it for several long seconds before reaching out with trembling hands. She took one bite, small and cautious, like she expected someone to snatch it away. Then another bite, bigger this time. Her shoulders sagged as the tension drained out of her body, and a sound escaped her that was half sob and half relief. She ate faster then, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks, as if her body finally understood it was allowed to accept help. The biker watched without rushing her, counting each breath, making sure she did not choke, making sure she stayed standing. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her sleeve and looked at him again, her eyes different now, softer but still guarded. He could see how small she really was, how fragile, how unfair it was that someone like her had learned to bargain for food instead of asking for it. He asked her name, gently, and after a pause she answered. Lily. She did not offer a last name. When he asked where her parents were, her fingers curled into the fabric of the toy and she shook her head again. Gone, she said. Just gone. The rain began to ease, but the cold remained, seeping into bones that had no protection left. The biker shrugged off his jacket and held it out. Lily hesitated, then slowly accepted it, the weight of it nearly swallowing her. She slipped her arms into the sleeves, and for the first time that night, she looked warm. As she stood there wrapped in leather that smelled of road and oil and something steady, the biker made a decision that settled deep and final. This night was not going to end with him riding away alone. The biker rose slowly and stepped back toward his motorcycle, keeping his movements calm so Lily would not feel rushed or trapped. He did not tell her what to do. He simply turned the bike slightly, so the headlight lit the cracked sidewalk and the bench where she had been standing. He gestured with an open hand, a silent invitation rather than a command. Lily hesitated, her fingers tightening around the ragged toy as she studied him, the bike, and the empty street behind her. Every instinct she had learned told her to be careful, to expect the moment when kindness turned into something else. The biker could see that battle playing out in her eyes. He crouched again, placing himself lower, making himself smaller. He told her his name was Daniel, and that he was not going to touch her unless she asked. He said she could sit on the bench or stand by the light or walk away if she wanted. He would not follow her. Lily listened without interrupting, her breath steadying as she realized he was giving her choices. After a long pause, she took a few cautious steps toward the bench and sat down, the leather jacket pulling around her like a shield that was too big but welcome. Daniel nodded once, accepting her decision, then removed his helmet and set it on the ground beside the bike. The simple act of leaving it. There was another signal. He was not leaving yet. He was staying. The rain slowed to a mist, and the night felt quieter, heavier. Daniel asked how long she had been alone. Lily looked down at the toy in her hands, tracing the worn fabric with her thumb as if the answer was stitched into it. She said she did not remember exactly when it started, only that it was warm then, and now it was cold. She talked about sleeping in places that smelled like old trash and wet cardboard, about counting days by how often her stomach hurt, about learning which streets had people who shouted and which ones pretended not to see her at all. Daniel listened without interrupting. He kept his hands still, resting on his knees, letting her words come out at their own pace. When she finished, she looked up quickly, waiting for his reaction, ready for disappointment. Instead, Daniel took a slow breath and asked one question. He asked if she felt safe right now. Lily thought about it, then nodded, just a little. That was enough for him. He told her the night was getting colder and that he had a place nearby with heat and food where she could warm up. He made it clear that she did not have to go if she did not want to. He said they could sit there until morning if that felt better. Lily stared at the motorcycle, then back at him. She asked if there were other people there. He said no. Just him in a small space that smelled like oil and coffee and old wood. She asked if there were locks. He said yes, and that she could see them herself. She asked if he would make her give up the toy. Daniel shook his head slowly and said that toy was hers and always would be. The words seemed to loosen something inside her. She stood, took 2 careful steps, then stopped again, fear flashing across her face as she remembered all the times she had trusted the wrong person. Daniel noticed and spoke before she could retreat. He told her that if at any point she wanted to leave, he would stop and let her off. No arguing. No anger. Lily studied his face, looking for lies, then nodded. Daniel pulled a spare helmet from the side of the bike and held it out. Lily reached for it, then paused, confused. He showed her how it worked, how it would keep her safe, how it was just like his. When she put it on, it slid down too far, making her laugh softly despite herself. The sound caught Daniel off guard. It had been a long time since that sound had found him. He helped adjust the strap without touching her skin, guiding her hands instead of his own. When she climbed onto the seat behind him, she sat stiff and straight, leaving space between them. Daniel told her she could hold the back rail or his jacket if she needed to. She chose the jacket, gripping it with one small hand while the other clutched the toy. As the motorcycle started and rolled forward, Lily leaned slightly, feeling the vibration beneath her, the steady rhythm that did not rush or jerk. The road stretched ahead, wet and shining under the lights, and for the first time in a long while, Lily felt something close to hope, fragile and uncertain, but real enough to hold. The ride ended behind a low brick building tucked between an abandoned warehouse and a closed auto parts store, its single light glowing through a rain-streaked window like a promise that had not given up yet. Daniel shut off the motorcycle and waited, letting the sudden quiet settle before making any move. Lily did not climb off right away. Her body stiffened, and her grip on his jacket tightened until her knuckles pressed white against the dark leather. The smell of oil and damp concrete filled the air, and the shadows around the building seemed to stretch longer than they had on the street. Daniel felt the shift immediately. He spoke softly, telling her they were there, telling her nothing was going to happen unless she said it was okay. Lily shook her head, small and sharp, the helmet sliding slightly as she did. Her breathing quickened, shallow and fast, the way it had before she begged for food. She whispered that places like this always looked safe at first. She said she had been taken into places before, places with lights and doors and people who smiled, and it never stayed that way. Her words came out rushed now, spilling over each other as fear took hold. Daniel did not reach for her. He stepped away from the bike instead, putting distance between them, and sat down on the curb with his hands open and empty. He told her she was right to be careful. He told her that being scared meant she was paying attention, and that was not a bad thing. Lily watched him closely, her eyes darting between his face and the door behind him. She asked what would happen if she said no. Daniel answered without hesitation. He said he would take her back to the bus stop or anywhere else she chose. He said she could even wait there until the sun came up. Lily swallowed hard, the words sinking in slowly. She slid off the seat at last, but did not move closer. She stood with the toy pressed tight against her chest, her shoulders hunched as if she expected the night itself to grab her. Daniel pointed out the small details, the way the window showed a single room inside, the way the door was metal and solid, the way there was only one way in and out. He told her she could check everything herself. He told her he would stay outside the whole time if that made her feel safer. Lily took a step toward the door, then froze again, shaking her head. She said she could not go in alone. The memory was too heavy. Daniel nodded, understanding the weight of that fear. He told her he would stand in the doorway, not inside, not blocking her path, just there so she would not feel alone. She thought about it for a long moment, rain dripping from the edge of the roof onto the pavement beside them. Finally, she nodded once, barely visible. Daniel opened the door and stood to the side, leaving the path clear. Warm air drifted out, carrying the smell of coffee and something old but clean. Lily took a hesitant step inside, then another, her eyes scanning every corner. The space was small, with a couch pushed against one wall and a battered table under the window. Tools hung neatly on hooks, and a heater hummed quietly in the corner. There were no other doors, no hidden rooms. Lily stood just inside, trembling, and Daniel stayed exactly where he said he would, half in the doorway, half out. She asked if he would promise not to lock the door. Daniel told her he would not lock it. He told her she could see the lock the whole time. Lily relaxed just enough to slide the helmet off her head, setting it carefully on the table as if it were something fragile. She looked smaller without it, the jacket swallowing her frame. The heat began to sink into her skin, and her shaking slowed. She sat down on the edge of the couch, still clutching the toy, still ready to bolt if needed. Daniel asked if she wanted water or more food. She nodded, too tired to speak now. As he moved to get it, she flinched, her eyes wide again. Daniel stopped immediately, raising his hands and stepping back. He waited until she nodded before moving again, every action slow and announced. Lily watched him closely, learning him the way she had learned the streets, piece by piece. When he handed her the water, she took it with both hands and drank deeply, her shoulders finally dropping as the warmth and safety began to compete with fear. She did not smile. Not yet. But she stayed. And for Lily, staying was the hardest thing of all. The heater hummed steadily, filling the small room with a low comforting sound as the last of the cold eased out of Lily's hands. She sat on the couch with her feet tucked beneath her, the leather jacket wrapped tight around her shoulders, and the ragged toy resting in her lap, like a guard she refused to set down. Daniel stayed where he was, leaning lightly against the wall near the doorway, close enough to be present but far enough to keep the space open. He watched the way her eyes followed every movement he made, how her shoulders tensed whenever he shifted his weight, and how they slowly loosened again when nothing bad followed. He spoke quietly, not to fill the silence, but to make it less heavy. He told her the heater was old but reliable, that it rattled sometimes but always worked, and that the couch had been there longer than he had. Lily listened without looking up at first. Her fingers traced the frayed edge of the toy, rubbing the worn fabric back and forth like a habit built over years. After a while, she glanced toward the small table by the window where a plate sat with another sandwich, still wrapped. Daniel noticed and gently pushed it a little closer with his foot, then stepped back again. She waited, watching him, then reached out and took it. This time she ate more slowly, savoring each bite as if afraid it might be the last. When she finished, she wiped her hands carefully on a napkin he had placed beside her, folding it neatly the way someone once taught her to be polite. Daniel asked if she felt warmer now. She nodded. He asked if she was tired. She nodded again, her eyelids heavy but her body still tense, unwilling to let go completely. Daniel thought for a moment, then moved to a shelf and took down a small blanket, faded but clean. He did not hand it to her. He placed it on the arm of the couch within reach and stepped back. Lily watched him, then slowly pulled it over her legs, keeping the jacket wrapped tight around her shoulders. The room grew quieter, the kind of quiet that felt safe instead of empty. After a long moment, Lily spoke. She asked why he stopped. The question hung in the air, simple and sharp. Daniel did not answer right away. He looked at the floor, then back at her, choosing his words with care. He said there was a time when someone small and scared had needed help, and he had not been there. He said some mistakes stay with you, no matter how far you ride or how loud the road gets. Lily studied his face, seeing not the biker everyone feared, but a man holding something heavy inside. She did not ask more. Instead, she reached down and picked up the toy, holding it out toward him with both hands. Daniel froze. She told him he could hold it for a minute if he wanted. She said it helped when things felt bad. Daniel hesitated, then slowly sat on the edge of the opposite chair and reached out, careful not to touch her fingers. The toy felt lighter than he expected, soft and worn smooth by years of being held. He turned it over gently, noticing the uneven stitches and the faded color that once might have been bright. He handed it back after a moment, nodding in thanks. Lily pulled it close again, satisfied. Something shifted then, subtle but real. She leaned back against the couch, her shoulders relaxing as exhaustion finally claimed its space. Daniel asked if she wanted him to stay there or step outside for a bit. She thought about it, then said he could stay where he was, as long as he did not turn off the light. He agreed immediately. Minutes passed. The rain outside faded to a quiet drizzle, tapping softly against the window. Lily's breathing slowed, her grip on the toy loosening as sleep crept in. Just before her eyes closed, she asked one more question, her voice barely above a whisper. She asked if he would still be there when she woke up. Daniel answered without hesitation. He said yes. He said he was not going anywhere. Lily nodded, trusting the words enough to let her eyes close. As she drifted into sleep, her face softened, the hard edges worn down by warmth and food, and a promise that felt solid. Daniel stayed still, watching over her, feeling the weight of that promise settle onto his shoulders. For the first time in years, it did not feel like a burden. It felt like something he had been missing all along. Daniel remained awake long after Lily fell asleep, the room lit by the single overhead light she had asked him not to turn off. The heater continued its steady hum, and the rain outside faded into silence. He sat in the chair with his hands clasped loosely, his eyes moving between the sleeping child on the couch and the door, as if guarding both. Watching Lily sleep stirred memories he had spent years trying to bury under miles of asphalt and noise. The quiet gave them space to rise. He remembered another small room from a long time ago, one that smelled like old carpet and cold air, where a little girl used to wait by a window every night. She had been his sister. She was younger than him by several years, thin and stubborn, with hair that never stayed neat no matter how hard she tried. Their parents had worked too much and worried too little, and when things went wrong, they went wrong fast. Daniel remembered nights when there was not enough food and days when there was no one around to notice. He remembered how she used to clutch a stuffed animal with one missing eye, holding it the same way. Lily held her toy now. Back then, he had promised himself that one day he would be strong enough to protect her from everything. But strength came too late. One winter night, colder than it should have been, he had left her alone for just a little while, thinking nothing would happen. When he came back, the room was quiet in a way that felt wrong. He carried that silence with him ever since. The road became his escape, the engine his way of drowning out guilt that never truly went away. As Daniel sat there now, the weight of that old failure pressed against his chest. He looked at Lily curled beneath the blanket, her breathing even, her face relaxed in a way that told him she felt safe, at least for this moment. His throat tightened. He realized he had been afraid of this feeling, afraid that helping her would tear open wounds he had sealed shut long ago. But he also realized something else. Those wounds had never really healed. They had only been waiting. Lily stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly, her fingers tightening briefly around the toy before relaxing again. Daniel leaned forward without thinking, stopping himself before he moved too close. He stayed where he was, letting her settle on her own. The memory of his sister faded slightly, replaced by the reality in front of him. This was not the past. This was now. He could not change what had already happened, but he could choose what happened next. The light overhead flickered for a moment, then steadied. Daniel took a slow breath and made a quiet promise to himself. He would not disappear in the morning. He would not hand this moment off to someone else just to ease his conscience. Whatever came next, he would face it with his eyes open. Lily shifted again, waking just enough to glance around the room. Her eyes found Daniel immediately. For a split second, fear flashed across her face, then faded when she saw him still there, still watching over her. She did not sit up. She simply closed her eyes again, reassured. That small act of trust hit him harder than any memory. He understood then that trust was not something given all at once. It was built in quiet moments like this, when someone stayed instead of leaving. Daniel leaned back in the chair, the past finally loosening its grip just enough to let him breathe. Outside, the sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly, the long night inching toward morning. Inside the small room, a man who had spent years running finally allowed himself to stay, holding space for a child who had learned too early what it meant to be alone. In that stillness, surrounded by the hum of the heater and the soft rhythm of Lily's breathing, Daniel felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. It was not guilt. It was not fear. It was a fragile sense of purpose, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like enough. Morning crept in slowly, pale light slipping through the window and spreading across the small room in thin lines. Lily stirred first, blinking as if unsure where she was, her body tensing until her eyes found Daniel still seated in the chair. He had not moved. Relief crossed her face before she could hide it. She sat up carefully, the blanket sliding down to her lap, the leather jacket still wrapped around her shoulders like armor she was not ready to give back. Daniel greeted her softly and asked if she slept all right. She nodded, then hesitated, her fingers tightening around the ragged toy. The new day seemed to bring a different kind of fear with it, heavier and more complicated than the fear of the night before. Daniel noticed the change. He asked if she was hungry again, and told her he could make something simple. Lily nodded, but her eyes never left him. As he moved to the small counter, she suddenly spoke, her voice sharp with urgency. She told him not to call anyone. The words came out fast, as if she had been holding them in all night. Daniel froze and turned slowly to face her, keeping his hands visible. He asked who she meant. Lily shook her head hard, tears already forming. She said not the police, not the people with badges, not anyone official. She said every time someone did that, she disappeared. She said they took her somewhere loud and cold, with too many rules and too many locked doors. Her breathing quickened as she spoke, the memory pulling her back into places she did not want to remember. Daniel lowered himself to sit on the floor, putting himself at her level without getting closer. He told her to take her time. Lily swallowed and went on, her voice trembling now. She said they never listened. They asked the same questions over and over, and when she could not answer them the right way, they wrote things down anyway. She said they promised it would be temporary, but temporary turned into days and then weeks, and she always ended up back on the street somehow, just farther from the places she knew. Her hands shook as she hugged the toy to her chest, the fabric darkened by tears. Daniel felt a familiar anger rise in him, slow and controlled. He did not interrupt her. When she finished, the room fell quiet except for the hum of the heater. Lily looked at him with raw fear, waiting for his response, bracing for the moment when he would decide for her. Daniel took a long breath and chose his words carefully. He told her he would not call anyone without talking to her first. He told her he believed her. He told her that what happened to her mattered. Lily stared at him, stunned, as if she had never heard those words directed at her before. She asked if he was lying. Daniel shook his head and said no. He said he did not know everything yet, and he did not pretend to, but he knew that forcing her into something she feared would only make things worse. Lily's shoulders sagged, some of the tension leaving her body. She asked what would happen now. Daniel answered honestly. He said they would eat, they would take things one step at a time, and they would make decisions together. He said she had a say in what happened next. The idea seemed almost foreign to her. She considered it quietly, then nodded. As Daniel finished making a simple breakfast, Lily watched him from the couch, her guard still up, but no longer razor sharp. When he handed her a plate, she accepted it and ate slowly, thinking. After a while, she asked him a question that made his chest tighten. She asked if he would send her away later, after she got stronger. Daniel met her gaze and did not look away. He said he did not know what later would look like yet, but he promised he would not disappear without telling her. He promised he would not hand her off just to make things easier for himself. Lily studied his face, weighing the promise, then gave a small nod. Outside, the city began to wake, unaware of the quiet decision unfolding in that small room. Inside, a fragile agreement took shape, built not on authority or force, but on trust hard-earned and easily broken. Daniel knew the road ahead would not be simple. Lily knew it too, but for the first time, she was not facing it alone, and that made all the difference. The days passed slowly, each one folding into the next like the pages of a book that neither of them had read before. Daniel kept his promise. He stayed. For the first time in a long time, Lily found herself waking up to the same room, the same quiet, and the same steady presence. Daniel made breakfast each morning, and Lily ate without fear of it being taken away. She spent most of her days sitting by the window, watching the world pass by, her fingers tracing patterns in the dust on the table, the toy still tucked under her arm like a shield. She did not speak much, but her silence was no longer the kind that threatened to swallow her whole. It was the silence of someone who was learning to simply exist, without needing to always fight to survive. One afternoon, as the sunlight poured in through the window, Daniel was fixing a broken bike in the corner of the room when Lily spoke up. She asked him if he thought the world would ever be different. Daniel paused, his hands stilling on the rusted frame, unsure of what to say at first. He turned slowly to face her, his brow furrowed slightly, as if the question had taken him by surprise. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring out the window at the small patch of grass that was barely visible between the buildings. She asked again, quieter this time, like she was asking herself as much as him. Do you think it can change? Daniel walked over to the table and sat across from her. He didn't answer right away. He understood that the question wasn't just about the world. It was about her, about what she had lived through and what she hoped for now. He could see that her shoulders were tense again, that small wall of fear rising within her. But this time, he wasn't the one she was afraid of. She was afraid of being let down again. He could feel that. He wanted to say something reassuring, but the truth was, he didn't know. The world had a way of being relentless, and the road had taught him that much. But he also knew something else. He wasn't ready to give up on the idea of change, even if it seemed impossible. He finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. He told her that change was hard. He said that sometimes it felt like the whole world was stuck in the same loop, but that didn't mean it couldn't be different, even if it took a long time to get there. He said he couldn't promise it would be easy, but he promised that they would figure it out together. Lily looked at him then, her eyes searching his face, trying to find something in his words that would make her believe. He didn't expect her to trust him right away. He didn't even know if he fully trusted himself. But he also knew that in that moment, for the first time in a long time, she was letting someone in. She was letting him stand beside her. For the first time, they were not just two people walking parallel lives in the same room. They were connected by the possibility of something more. Lily didn't say anything for a while. She just sat there, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the table as if considering his words. After a long pause, she nodded, just slightly, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. Daniel smiled, small but genuine, and returned to his work, the sound of his hands moving over the bike filling the room again. The quiet between them wasn't filled with tension this time. It was the kind of silence that meant understanding had passed between them, the kind that said without words that they were in this together, for however long it took. That night, Lily sat by the window again, staring out into the dark, but this time, her posture was different. She wasn't huddled in on herself, guarding her heart as if it might shatter if she let it show. She was just looking, waiting, as if the world outside wasn't as scary as it once had been. Daniel glanced over at her from where he sat by the heater, reading a book he hadn't touched in years. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, he let himself think about tomorrow. He didn't know what it would bring, or how long they would stay in this small, quiet place, but it didn't matter. For the first time, there was hope in the space between them. It wasn't the kind of hope that promised things would be easy. It was the kind of hope that came with a promise to try, no matter what. Days began to blur into one another as the small, quiet routine they had settled into continued. Daniel had found a rhythm in his life that he hadn't realized he was missing. Waking up early, making breakfast, fixing whatever was broken in the small room, and checking in on Lily. Each day felt like another step forward, however small, towards something better. Lily, for her part, began to show signs of change too. She spent less time staring out the window and more time sitting with Daniel while he worked. She would ask him questions, sometimes about things she had learned about the world, sometimes about his past, and sometimes about what it was like to truly be free. Daniel answered her honestly, though he left much of his past untouched. He wasn't ready to share all of it, not yet. But she didn't push. Slowly, Lily started to share more of her own thoughts as well. She told him about the places she had been, the people who had come and gone from her life, and the feeling of being invisible to most of the world. Her words were hesitant at first, like she was testing the waters, but Daniel could hear the change in her voice. She wasn't speaking from a place of fear anymore. She was speaking from a place of hope. One morning, Daniel decided it was time to leave the small room behind for a while. The weather had cleared up after days of rain, and the sun was out, warm and bright. He thought it might be good for Lily to get some fresh air, to be outside for a while. He told her he was going to take her for a walk, nothing fancy, just a short walk around the block. Lily looked up from the corner where she had been sitting with her toy, her eyes cautious but curious. She asked him if it was safe. Daniel smiled, more to himself than to her, and told her they would be fine. He knew the neighborhood was quiet, but he also knew that Lily's question came from a place of not wanting to trust too easily. She had been hurt before. After a brief pause, she nodded, setting the toy down carefully on the couch as she stood up. Daniel handed her a jacket, and together they stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, and the world around them seemed to be waking up. The sidewalks were still wet from the previous rain, but the streets were mostly empty, save for a few people on their way to work. They walked slowly, side by side, Daniel letting Lily set the pace. She didn't say much at first, her eyes taking in the surroundings like she was seeing everything for the first time. She looked at the trees, the way the leaves were still wet, the way the sun was glinting off the puddles. She looked at the houses, at the small, familiar buildings that made up their neighborhood, and for the first time, she didn't look at them like they were just places to pass through. She looked at them like they were real. As they turned the corner, Lily stopped suddenly. She stared at a small bench outside a coffee shop, her face blank. Daniel looked at her, wondering what she was thinking, but he didn't press her to speak. After a long moment, she sat down on the bench, her hands gripping the edges. She asked him if she could stay there for a while. Daniel sat next to her, not saying anything, just letting her have the space she needed. After a few minutes, she spoke, her voice soft. She told him that she used to sit on benches like this one, waiting for people who never showed up. She said she used to wait for someone to notice her, to give her a reason to believe she mattered. Her words were quiet, like they were meant for her alone, but Daniel heard them. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat there with her, feeling the weight of everything she had been through. He knew it wasn't easy to trust, and he knew it wasn't easy to believe that people would show up for you when you needed them most. But he also knew that this moment, this small moment where she allowed herself to just sit, was a sign of something. She was letting herself exist, even if it was just for a little while. After a while, they stood up and continued their walk. Lily was quieter now, but there was a softness to her step, a lightness in her that hadn't been there before. She walked beside him, no longer looking over her shoulder, no longer afraid of what might come. The world still wasn't perfect. It was still hard and uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Lily was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, it could be different. When they returned to the small room later that day, Lily sat down by the window, the toy back in her lap, but now her hands were resting on it gently, not clutching it for dear life. Daniel smiled to himself, feeling the weight of the promise he had made to her. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. They were both moving forward, together. The next morning, Lily woke up earlier than usual, the sunlight creeping through the small window and casting long shadows on the floor. She sat up, stretching her arms above her head, the leather jacket still wrapped tightly around her. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the heater and the distant sound of birds chirping outside. She glanced over at Daniel, who was sitting by the table, his focus on a book he had been reading for the past few days. He didn't notice her watching, but she noticed him. The man who had brought her into this small world of safety, who had stayed by her side when she had given up on others. For the first time, Lily didn't feel the constant weight of her past pressing down on her. She felt something lighter, something new. Hope. She still wasn't sure what it meant, but she knew it felt real, and that was enough. She stood up quietly and walked to the small mirror in the corner of the room. She stared at her reflection, the same face she had seen for years, but something was different now. She wasn't just the girl who had been abandoned. She was someone who could stand on her own, even if she wasn't quite there yet. As she turned back to Daniel, she noticed the faint lines of worry around his eyes, the way he rubbed his hands over the book, not turning the pages. She walked over to him, her footsteps soft on the worn floorboards, and gently set the toy down on the table in front of him. Daniel looked up, startled, but when he saw the way she was looking at him, he relaxed, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He set the book down and gave her his full attention. She didn't speak at first, just sat across from him, her fingers tapping lightly on the table. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice steady but still carrying the weight of everything she had been through. She asked him what he thought it meant to be free. Daniel paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as he thought about her question. It wasn't an easy one. It wasn't the kind of thing you could answer quickly, especially not after everything she had been through. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest, and stared at the ceiling for a moment before answering. He said freedom wasn't just about being able to do whatever you wanted. It was about choosing what to do with the time you had. It was about deciding what kind of person you wanted to be, no matter what the world had thrown at you. He told her it wasn't always easy. Sometimes, the weight of everything could feel too heavy to carry. But freedom came in the little moments, the ones where you chose to stand up, even when the world felt like it was pushing you down. Lily listened intently, her eyes never leaving his face. She had heard those words before, in different ways, but hearing them from Daniel made them feel different, more real. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the street below. The world outside was still the same. People walking by, going about their lives, unaware of the two of them in the small room above it all. But for Lily, it felt different. She wasn't just passing through anymore. She was a part of it. She turned back to Daniel, her face thoughtful. She said she was tired of running, tired of being afraid. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew she couldn't keep living like she had been. Daniel nodded, his expression softening. He stood up slowly and walked over to her, his hands in his pockets. He said he understood. He said it wasn't going to be easy, but they would face whatever came next together. They didn't have to have all the answers right now. They just had to keep moving forward. He told her that sometimes, the best thing you could do was take the next step, even if you didn't know where it would lead. Lily didn't say anything, but she didn't have to. The quiet understanding between them spoke volumes. It was enough. She felt something shift inside her, like a weight had been lifted just a little. She wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to hide. She didn't need to run. Daniel stepped back, giving her space, but his presence was steady and unwavering. Lily took a deep breath and turned back to the window, looking out at the world with a new sense of possibility. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt like she had a future. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living. And that, for the first time in a long time, felt like enough. As the days went by, the rhythm of life settled into something resembling normalcy. The small room they shared became more than just a place to sleep. It was a haven, a place where Lily could breathe and where Daniel found a peace he hadn't realized he needed. The fear that had once marked every interaction, every moment of uncertainty, began to fade, replaced by a quiet trust that was fragile but real. Lily was still learning to let go, to believe that not everyone was going to hurt her, and Daniel was there for every step of it. He didn't rush her, never pushed her to speak when she wasn't ready. He simply stayed, and that was enough. One evening, as the light outside dimmed and the room grew quiet, Daniel was sitting by the window, reading through a mechanic's manual, his thoughts far away from the world outside. Lily was on the couch, the toy in her lap, a pen in her hand as she absent-mindedly doodled in a notebook. It was the first time in a long while that she seemed truly relaxed, her shoulders not drawn tight with tension. Daniel watched her for a moment before he spoke. He asked if she had ever thought about what she wanted to do next. The question hung in the air for a moment, and Lily looked up from her notebook, her expression thoughtful. She didn't answer right away. She wasn't sure she had an answer. The question itself felt different now, not like a demand or an expectation, but more like an invitation, a chance to think about what she might want instead of what she had to do. Lily paused, her mind wandering back to all the things she had once dreamed of before the world had become a place that only took. She thought of the places she had been and the people she had met, and somewhere between the dark days of survival and the quiet days here with Daniel, a small spark of hope had started to grow. Maybe, she thought, maybe there was a world beyond just getting by. After a long moment, she set the pen down and looked at him. She said she had always wanted to be a painter. Daniel raised an eyebrow, surprised. She hadn't shared much about her past ambitions, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if she meant it. But there was a certain softness in her eyes, something that told him she wasn't just saying it to fill the silence. She was serious. He smiled, a slow, genuine smile, and asked her why she hadn't pursued it. Lily shrugged, the weight of her past still pressing down on her. She told him that it had always felt like a dream for someone else, something people with normal lives could do. She had never been allowed that luxury. But now, in this strange little space, it didn't seem as impossible. She wasn't sure what would come next, but the idea of creating something felt different now. It felt like something she could actually reach for. Daniel's smile deepened. He told her that if she wanted to paint, there was no reason she couldn't. He said he would help her find supplies, even if it meant scraping together a little money to get started. She looked at him, a mix of surprise and skepticism in her gaze. She hadn't expected that kind of offer, especially not from someone like him, someone who had lived a life so different from hers. But his words were simple, matter of fact. He said everyone deserved to follow their dreams, no matter what had happened before. Lily felt something shift inside her, a quiet surge of hope that she had long forgotten. She wasn't sure what would come of it, but for the first time, she realized that maybe it wasn't too late to try. That night, they spent a few quiet hours planning. Daniel made a list of things they could try to find, and Lily sketched out what she thought she would need. They didn't have much, but the idea of starting something new felt like enough. It felt like they were taking control of something, even if it was just one small part of their lives. The next morning, Daniel drove them to the nearest store, a small second-hand shop with art supplies in the back corner. They searched through the aisles, picking out what they could afford, a set of paints, brushes, and a few canvases. Lily carried them carefully, almost reverently, like they were treasures. When they returned to the room, she wasted no time. She sat up in the corner near the window and began to paint. Daniel watched from the doorway for a few moments, then stepped back quietly. He didn't need to say anything. He could see the way Lily's hands moved, how focused and calm she was, how the brush glided over the canvas like it had always belonged there. For the first time in a long time, Lily looked truly free. It wasn't the kind of freedom that came with a grand gesture or a momentous change. It was the kind of freedom that came with taking control of one small part of her life and doing something just for her. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Daniel felt something new, something deep and steady, like the calm after a storm. He wasn't sure what the future held for either of them, but he knew one thing. This moment, this small act of creation, was enough for now. It was the start of something new, and that was all that mattered. Weeks passed, and with each day that went by, Lily felt herself changing. The small room that had once felt so foreign, so isolating, was now her place, a place where she could breathe, think, and create. The canvases began to fill with color, abstract shapes, splashes of blue and orange, lines that seemed to reflect the chaos of her mind and the calm of the life she was trying to build. Daniel kept his promise. He didn't ask her for anything more than what she was willing to give, and he never pushed her to be anything other than what she was. He didn't expect perfection. He didn't expect anything at all. And that, in itself, was a kind of freedom that Lily had never known before. One afternoon, Daniel came back to the room after running a few errands. He found her standing by the window, staring out into the street below, her hand resting on the sill, her fingers gently tracing the edge of the glass. He had gotten used to her quiet moments, the times when she seemed lost in her thoughts. He had learned not to interrupt them, knowing that when she was ready to talk, she would. Today, however, she turned toward him as soon as he walked in, and there was something in her eyes, something different. She asked him if he thought she could make it on her own. The question startled him, and for a moment, he didn't know how to answer. He had always thought of their time together as temporary, a moment of healing and understanding, but the idea of her leaving, of her being ready to face the world on her own, brought a mix of pride and fear. He set down the groceries he had been carrying and looked at her, taking a deep breath. He told her that he believed she could do whatever she set her mind to. He said she had already come so far, and he had seen her grow in ways that even she might not have realized. She had found her strength again. He told her that when the time was right, she would know. Lily studied him for a long time, as if weighing his words, then nodded slowly, a small smile breaking through the uncertainty in her eyes. She thanked him, quietly, before turning back to the window. She didn't speak for the rest of the evening, but Daniel didn't mind. He knew that whatever she was thinking, she was starting to believe in herself again. That night, as they sat together, eating a simple meal, Daniel felt something shift. It wasn't just the hope that had settled in their lives, but the realization that the time had come. Lily was ready. She was ready to step out into the world, to make her own choices, to find her own place. And while the thought of her leaving brought a wave of sadness, it was also a sign that she was no longer the scared, lost girl who had walked into his life months ago. She was a person with her own future, her own dreams, and her own strength. The next morning, Daniel woke up early, as he always did. He found Lily sitting at the table, her eyes focused on the new painting she had started the night before. The colors were more deliberate now, the brushstrokes more confident. She had been working on it for hours, and as he watched her, he saw the change. She was no longer just filling the canvas with color. She was telling a story. When she saw him standing in the doorway, she smiled and stood up, brushing her hands on her pants. She said she thought it was time. Daniel didn't ask what she meant, but he knew. He nodded and smiled back, proud of her. He told her that whatever she decided, he would support her. After breakfast, Lily packed up her things. It wasn't much, just a small bag with clothes, the toy she had kept all these months, and a few of the paintings she had finished. She didn't know where she would go yet, but she knew she was ready to find her own path. Daniel helped her with the door, holding it open for her as she stepped out. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. They had both known this moment would come. The world outside had changed in small, but significant ways. The sun was shining, the air was warmer than it had been in weeks, and for the first time in a long time, Lily felt like she could breathe. She looked back at Daniel, her face soft with gratitude. She didn't have all the answers, but she had something she hadn't had before: hope. With one last glance at the room, at the place where everything had shifted for her, she turned and walked out into the world. Daniel watched her go, standing by the door for a long moment, then closing it softly behind him. He wasn't sure what came next for either of them, but he knew one thing for sure: she would be okay. He would make sure of that. Months passed, and the world outside continued to move, unaware of the small, quiet victories being won in the shadows. Daniel had kept his word, staying true to the promise he had made to Lily, that he would be there for her as long as she needed him. He didn't know exactly when she had crossed the threshold of independence, when the girl who had once been afraid to speak was now finding her voice in the world, but he knew it had happened. Lily had begun to show up at the local art gallery once a week, displaying some of the pieces she had painted in the small room where she had spent those first weeks of recovery. She had started selling her work, a few pieces at a time, but it was enough. Enough to show her that she could make her own choices, make her own path. Each time she visited, she looked more at ease, more confident. The tentative steps she had taken months ago were now firm strides. Daniel, for his part, had kept the workshop going, still fixing motorcycles and occasionally helping out with local repairs. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept the lights on and his hands busy. More than that, it kept him connected to the world, to the sense that even though everything had changed, some things, simple things, stayed the same. He had stopped checking the door every time someone knocked, waiting for someone from his past to show up and take him away from this small life. It didn't matter anymore. He had a home now, a place where he was needed. The day came when Lily finally told him it was time for her to move on. She had found a small apartment in town, a place she could afford with her art sales. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She had arranged the move carefully, with the same quiet determination that had marked her every step since she'd come into his life. The room had been filled with the sound of boxes being packed, canvases stacked neatly against the wall, and the soft shuffle of feet moving across the floor. When it came time to leave, Lily had hugged Daniel, long and tight. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. He knew that this moment had come, that she was ready to be on her own, to continue walking the path she had started. The door closed softly behind her, and Daniel was left standing in the quiet, surrounded by memories. He didn't feel empty. He didn't feel sad. He felt a sense of pride, of quiet satisfaction, that he had helped her find her way back to herself. She wasn't the same girl who had walked into his life so many months ago, and neither was he. He wasn't sure what the future held for either of them, but he knew that for now, they had both done something important. They had taken control of their own stories. A few weeks later, Lily stopped by to visit. She was different, older somehow, but in a way that only came from living through something and coming out the other side stronger. She had brought a small painting with her, one that she had made just for him. It was simple, just a landscape, with rolling hills and a sky that stretched far and wide. It wasn't one of her more intricate pieces, but it was full of warmth, of possibility. She handed it to him with a smile, the same quiet smile she had worn the first time she had entered his workshop. Daniel took the painting carefully, studying it for a moment before looking back at her. She told him it was a reminder that the world was big, but that it wasn't out of reach, that no matter what happened, there would always be a way forward. She told him it was time for both of them to live the lives they had been given, without waiting for something else to happen. He smiled back, accepting the gift, the meaning behind it clear in the quiet moment between them. She was right. It was time. They said their goodbyes. With no drama, no fanfare. There was no need for it. Lily had found her place, and Daniel had found his. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, it didn't matter. The past was behind him, and the road ahead was waiting, full of promise. And so, they both moved forward, separate but not alone, carrying with them the quiet strength they had found in each other. They had both changed. They had both found freedom in their own way. And that was enough.